everybody. This is Laura Nicole Miller. I am here with my colleagues from this cohort of the DET. We are going to set up some foundational knowledge that's going to help you as you dive into the sessions that are available to you as a part of this ProGrow workshop. And so first we'll just do a little bit of introduction so that you know who we are and what perspective we're bringing to this work. And then we'll go into some of the foundational concepts around educational technology and its integration into teaching and learning that will be helpful to you as you explore the different sessions that are a part of this workshop. So I'll start. I am a VP of marketing at an ed tech company. So I'm from the SaaS vendor perspective, really focused on that workforce component of tying from teaching and learning to placing in the job market, being successful, the economic and social mobility that is available through higher education to get you to that point where you can be successful in the workplace. I'm a first generation college student, so I do a lot of research and focus reading on that topic. And I have a library science background, so information literacy, the general critical use of and exploration of resources and information sources are really important to me as well. So that's me. And then I'll hand it over to you, Susan. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Susan Sobrad, and I've been an educator for over 30 years, most of that in secondary school. I am really interested in the idea about creativity as it relates to the use of educational technology in the classroom. Students who I've polled recently have said, I'm not a very creative person, which to me is very concerning, because in this world where we're going to be needing creative people to solve some problems that don't even exist yet, we're going to need that creative mindset in order for us to survive and grow in the world, even solve the problems that we're going to be facing. So I am really interested in looking at motivation, especially in this program, and how that ties into psychological needs of the students, and how that relates to the process of analyzing technology that we use in the classroom. So kind of a big wraparound of tying creativity and processes and making good choices.
Wonderful. Thanks, Susan. I'm Brianna Naglich. I'll be talking about participation. I am a middle school teacher, 8 years in the classroom to date, and all of my experience comes from Title I. So I'm an advocate for equity, advocate for Title I students who have, low income situations happening in their communities, as well as some challenges when it comes to SEL practices. So as we dive into our ProGrow here in our webinar, you'll be hearing from me about participation. Big component in how do we get reluctant learners to just interact and begin their learning journey so that we can continue to take them where they need to go and infuse some additional skills along the way. So I did my master's in instructional tech, so that's kind of where that additional educational technology layers in nicely for all those pieces, including Title I. So our team here, we've worked together for a framework that we call PMERGE, Participation, Motivation, Engagement, Retention Guide. And as we explore that and its components, where we're going to relate to PICRAT and how that kind of allows us to not only evaluate our ed tech tools, but use them with intention to meet those layers of participation, motivation, engagement, and I said motivation, participation, motivation, and engagement. Anybody want to add anything about that PMERGE or the PICRAT?
All right, so PICRAT's kind of an interesting technology integration matrix, because it actually includes creativity, which is something I really like. I already mentioned that that's a big focus of mine. And so at its very basic level, PICRAT can be applied to both teacher and student relationships to technology, where teachers might use it for replacing things, they might use it for amplifying certain activities, or best of all, use it for transforming traditional types of activities into something completely different. For students, students can be passive where they're just listening or hearing. That's a very low level on the PICRAT scale. Or they can be interactive, which is a step up. And that's a very easy thing to do with technology. But best of all, we want students to be creating, and that's the highest level for students' relationship to technology on the PICRAT scale. We want them to be creating, using transformational practices put in place by the teacher. So at its highest level, students are really functioning in a way that's going to help them be problem solvers in the future.
And Susan, I love how you said that creativity, it's the highest level of this scale that we're looking at, this matrix. And it's the only one of all of the frameworks that includes creativity, but this places it at the top. So why aren't we involving that more in any sort of, instructional design and evaluation of educational tools? Now, I'm not asking you, but just like a thought that I'm prompting for us to consider.
I don't know why we're not. It doesn't make any sense to me either. So.
I love that, Ty. I always think about that since we've been working together and we came up with this guide, and Susan always brings that creativity component. And I think I've noted it in many discussion post reactions for your work, Susan. You keep reminding me in this coursework that we're doing, and then also out in the corporate world, about the importance of creativity, but also the challenge of translating creativity to a return on investment so that people then will place it with the highest weight when they're thinking about, is this a good use of technology? Is this teaching and learning impactful? Is this the right way to do this? And so I think that is the question, Brianna, that why aren't we doing it more? And I think part of it is that people can't really quantify the impact that creativity will have. And also, Susan, what you said at the beginning of this conversation about how we are trying to prepare students to solve problems that don't exist yet. And so it's hard to I guess just quantifiably track the impact and the way that what we're doing today with teaching and learning and technology to amplify the impact of teaching and learning. It's hard to teach to that test since we don't know what that test looks like and we're just used to teaching to a test. So I think that that's such a good question, and I don't have an answer either. I'm just going to back up that I think we should ask it and ask it and ask it and ask it.
And Laura, as you were processing that and sharing your thoughts on it, it sparked in my mind that creativities are always the first to go, right? Like we can think back to being in the classroom and, back in my day, making the crafts and doing the things, which isn't necessarily all creativity, but it's more hands-on approach. But when we start seeing deficits, especially because of COVID or, inequity so that there's a lesser readings ability, we immediately get rid of the frills and try to get down to the bare bones. And that's where creativity starts to be sucked out of education because we got to make up and bridge all these gaps. So
yeah, I really think it's important to focus on the process piece. The end product, the test, is not what should be important, at least in my opinion. It's that process, how to get there and creative ways to get there that are so important, which kind of draws us back to our PMERGE framework. Right? All of the pieces have to be intentionally put in there with room for choice, with room for creativity, with room for making connections and building relationships in order that those creative processes can actually come forth. Because again, it's not the test, it's not the poster, it's not the end that we should be concerned about, but how we got there. And so I think it's hard to teach for sure, but I'd really like to come up with some ideas about how to make that work. And I think PMERGE is one of those first steps toward getting there.
Yeah. And not to be Selwyn, but I feel like educational technology was a Band-Aid. It was how can we increase the production? How can we expedite this learning concept versus how can we use it creatively, or how can we use it to motivate, participate, and engage so that we can help students actually want to do the work in the first place. So we're finding ways to be creative through it when it's really just been put in place to, increase our abilities to produce. But any final thoughts here before we jump into the heart of the PMERGE? Anybody?
I don't think so.
I
I
think-
think we just need to step forward and see what's next. And I think you're first up, aren't you, Brianna?
I think so. So let's head over to participation. Hi, so for this portion of our program, we're going to talk about participation practices through educational technology and how those tools can impact social emotional learning. So as we said, participation kind of opens the door to greater engagement and motivation, hence our P-MERGE framework. So participation can look very, very different based on how it is included in a classroom, but obviously instructional technology and educational technology can aid in developing participation for students. When we have students that are developing social emotional needs or developing social emotional practices, participation done in a safe space allows those students to unlock greater community and these risk-taking skills that I'll talk about in a second. So in this portion, we're going to talk about what is participation and how does it open that door to engagement. How does participation impact SEL, social emotional learning, and then what EdTech tools support the intentionality of participation practices rather than doing it just to do it. And that happens a lot. And that's kind of where Selwyn was headed with that replacement instead of that intentionality. So participation matters because it shifts from being more teacher-centered to student-centered. We all have been or have participated in classes that are very lecture-led. So simply by opening the door to participation, be it answering questions, raising of hands, fist to five, all of those like very basic practices allows for greater interactivity with the lesson itself, therefore creating those new wires in our brain to eventually be able to do this on our own for engagement. So while engagement is obviously vital to student success, the participation is the like little stepping stone that gets us to doing the work or wanting to continue to do the work. So even without the basic participation of I agree, yes, no, I share my thoughts, it's easy to lock out and just kind of sit there and be not present. And with students who have needs in the SEL world, that's easier said than done, right? Our heads are down, we're sleeping. So to be able to foster the ability to participate through a digital means gives a space where it's okay to take risks, it's okay to get the answer wrong, and there's the ability to premeditate what you're going to say and respond with versus the in-person, in the moment fears that can come with developing SEL. So why does participation matter for SEL practices? This is a great article by Gordon and Wright about middle school boys. It develops the ability to take risks. So without having a safe space to practice, it is terrifying. And it talks about how especially middle school boys are developing in their own world and having all these conflicts. But within a safe space of participation, those risks don't seem quite as big, especially if we use these digital tools we'll discuss in a second and that you can share out that give that trial run to write it up first, to respond first, and to be able to edit versus the fear that is the reason why I went into teaching is the popsicle sticks. We all recall participation practices to get people to answer, pulling names out of a jar and then, you know, the cold calling. So digital tools that will prevent those scarring moments for our SEL students. Accept and persevere through challenges. As challenges, questions, prompts arrive, after we can take that risk and we feel safe and we're able to get the wrong answer and still be okay, then we can start to persevere and try harder and do more and go a little bit further, all through participation. And lastly, finding meaningful activities to participate in, that is that intentionality. We're going to discuss those in just a second. That will eventually lead us to the M in motivation for greater retention and practices. So we're going to do a little like brain break engagement activity. So we're going to spend the rest of our time. I'm going to pause or you can pause your video here in just a second. Let's just first start by getting out a notebook, a piece of paper, maybe even just a Post-it on your screen, something you can write on because we're going to make some lists, do some little typing around. So when you are ready, of course, pause me if you need more time. Let's start by just listing ways that you have encouraged participation in your learning space. I'm going to stop for a second. Pause me if you need. List as many ways as you can that you've encouraged participation. To get you started. maybe Popsicle Sticks, Kahoot, Look It, Fist of Five. Anyone dance the line? Okay, I'll stop. Once you have your list, take a minute to jot down the reasons why you think students either like that one or why the excuses that they might make for why they don't participate. In my room, Kahoot, everyone loves a Kahoot. It's game-based, it's fun, there's points. Why might they make the excuse to not play in Kahoot? They no longer think that it's required because it's a game. Maybe because they don't do well and they don't score well, so they don't care about the points. Or they say, do we get candy? And you say no. And then they're like, okay, fine, I don't care. Just an idea. Okay, last question for you. Write this down. What social emotional learning needs might result in participate, or the reasons they participate, or the reasons they may not? Pause and write if you need. Let's stick with that idea of Kahoot. Social emotional learning, if we are not able to accept that we are not getting the right score, if we're getting frustrated, we tap out when we get 1 or 2 red screens, and it goes to the slamming the device, the upset with the activity, that might not be fostered through that quick game-based learning activity. Therefore, even though it's participation, might not help our SEL students. Okay, now we're going to kind of evaluate these SEL tools. I would love for you to circle on your list anything that's an open resource. So as Selwyn discussed, open resources are shared. They are created by individuals, but then kind of exploited for the benefit of these freemium groups where you get a basic subscription for free. But then if you would like the additional resources, you have to pay a subscription. So circle all of your freemiums, or not your freemiums, circle all of your open resources. And write down why that might be a benefit to you and how you could see a downfall in that when it comes to creating your own educational resources. Perfect. Now let's take a moment to evaluate all, or pick two, not all. You might have a nice long list if you have a lot of participation in your space. Let's take a moment to evaluate all of these in our PICRAT matrix. So PICRAT's divided into 2 parts. We've got the PIC, passive, interactive, and creative, and then we have our RAT, replaces, amplifies, and transforms. I'm in Baltimore, so we love our Baltimore rats. But anywho, take those two ed tech tools, so there's 2 forms of participation that you've selected, and see where they would fall on our PICRAT kind of continuum here. Start with the PIC. Is it passive? Is it interactive? Or is it truly creative? Then work your way over. Does it replace technology? Does it amplify it? Or does it really truly transform? Obviously in PICRAT, we love the CT, right, where it interlaps. We've got our creative and a transform. But often in our participation world, sometimes we don't need to get all the way to that component. That's later on in our M and our E, our motivation and our engagement. Right now, we're looking for a way to interact and a way to amplify voices and amplify ideas and thoughts versus just replacing technology for a raise of a hand. Together, we're going to look at VoiceThread. So VoiceThread is a great tool. It's collaborative. It is also obviously a participation tool. We're going to be talking about it right now. And I'm going to leave you with a link. We'll find a great way to share this link with you. And in your time in our VoiceThread link, there are some prompts. I'll go through them really quick. We will get them so that you are able to view them for your ProGrow webinar here. But the first one is on slide 1. This is our PMerge participation, first of all. So it is a PowerPoint uploaded into VoiceThread that you can then participate throughout. Some teachers use them through like as a class as you go through your slides for direct instruction, others as homework or even in a flipped learning format. But that being said, on slide 1, I would love for you to try to leave a written comment with your name and the lens in which you view educational technology for participation. So maybe my example is, my name is Brianna Naglich. I'm a middle school STEM teacher, and I'm seeking to increase participation for students with low motivation and engagement, also students developing SEL practices. Maybe you are on admin side, maybe you are in ed tech world, whatever it is, please leave just a comment with your name and your lens. There is a workbox where you can discuss how this comment tool could be used within your instruction. For slide 4, go ahead and record a voice comment with one thing you see and one thing you wonder about the P-merge visual. So slide 4, go to it, click the little button to record a voice comment. You are able to respond to one another. Maybe listen to one if there's one up. What components of PIC and RAT is supported by your experience of VoiceThread so far? Leave that in your written box. Lastly, for slide 11, consider how you could use video recording tools to increase participation. Then on your worksheet, there is how could your content / your area of study or current practice prepare lessons that translate into VoiceThread. This is a tool you're sticking with. How can you use it better to increase participation? That is the P in P-merge. Thank you for letting me share with you. Hope you learned something new.
Hello everyone, my name is Susan, and in this installment of the webinar, we'll be exploring the M in P-merge, motivation. The focus will be on the attributes of self-determination theory that can help us choose strategies to increase motivation. Self-determination theory was first proposed in 1985. Since that time, the theory has been studied extensively and has been successfully used to explain factors that contribute to student success in the face-to-face classroom. Much more recently, in 2019, self-determination theory was also found to be applicable to student success in online courses. With this in mind, we're going to explore 3 questions. How does self-determination theory relate to motivation? What strategies can be used to leverage the elements of self-determination theory in online environments? Which EdTech tools facilitate motivation in the blended and online setting? Self-determination theory proposes that people have 3 innate psychological needs that are necessary for one's well-being: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. According to the theory, when these needs are met, motivation increases. Why is this important? Well, simply put, motivation is highly valued because of its consequences. Motivation produces. Autonomy, the first psychological need we'll talk about, refers to one's ability to make decisions and take action by choice. These choices should be based on one's own values, interests, and goals. Autonomy involves a sense of agency and control over one's life and over work environment. Being allowed to express creativity through choices makes feelings of satisfaction increase and amplifies persistence. So, meeting the need for autonomy results in a host of positive outcomes, including higher self-esteem and an increased sense of well-being. Most importantly, for online learning, autonomy can lead to increased motivation. The second of the 3 psychological needs, competency, refers to the knowledge and skills an individual has and their efficacy in using them. Efficacy is that feeling of, I can do this work. Efficacy can relate to what a person knows and learns, but again, it also relates to the scope of the work. Is one confident that they will be able to complete the work well and on time? One way to establish this I think I can attitude is by establishing an appropriate level of complexity. Assigned tasks need to fall within the Goldilocks zone. The Goldilocks zone is that space in which tasks are not too easy and not too hard, a space where help arrives just in time to ensure progress towards goals continues. When these conditions are met, individuals will more likely be motivated to persevere. The last of the psychological needs, relatedness, is synonymous with a sense of belonging. Self-determination theory suggests that when individuals need to feel connected to others, when these connections are in place, individuals are more likely to be intrinsically motivated to pursue activities because it is simply more enjoyable and interesting to engage and work with others. Just knowing others are involved in the same tasks can lead to a greater sense of belonging. They are not alone in the work. So, while autonomy, competence, and relatedness are all essential psychological needs for humans, helping students to meet these needs in an online learning environment requires different approaches. Strategies must be intentionally and thoughtfully chosen. Autonomy supporting strategies must align with a student's values and beliefs if motivation is to be increased. So when providing choices, there must be enough options to ensure that students can truly choose a pathway that is inherently interesting and personally meaningful. Choice might mean offering a variety of different learning materials or resources that students can choose from depending on their preferred learning styles. Other online practices to support autonomy might be the removal of tight, short deadlines and mandatory assignments. Instead, students might be given broader time frames and the choice to combine assignments of different weights and complexity in order to reach desired goals. Self-paced work with periodic synchronous discussions to answer questions and explore more difficult concepts can also enhance student autonomy, as can the removal of grade penalties for late work. These and other autonomy supporting strategies contribute to feelings of confidence and competence. The second of 3 psychological needs, competence, again, refers to the knowledge and skills that an individual possesses. I mentioned earlier that individuals must also possess self-efficacy, which is related to one's perceptions of their abilities. One can have high competency, but low self-efficacy. Thus, even though they have the skills, their lack of confidence can influence their motivation to try. On the other hand, one might have low competency, but high self-efficacy. In this instance, high self-efficacy can result in a willingness to tackle hard problems with confidence, learning what they need to know along the way. Nurturing feelings of self-efficacy in the online setting might begin with clearly written expectations that allow students to feel certain about course tasks and expectations. Providing specific and timely feedback consistently is important so students have time to reflect on their learning and how to make informed decisions about how to improve their work. Offering regular online office hours to give students a chance to ask questions, providing access to tutorial videos, and recording synchronous teaching sessions that students can refer back to when needed are all ways to support students as they grapple with complex work. In addition to supporting competence, online virtual tutorial sessions can contribute to a student's sense of relatedness. Creating a sense of relatedness or belonging can be achieved by providing opportunities for students to connect with one another or with the instructor. Relatedness can be fostered through collaborative activities. Collaboration fosters creativity by incorporating the collective thinking of the entire group in designing and developing solutions to problems. Collaboration also has the potential to reduce the perceived psychological cost of diving into hard work because the workload is shared. While group work might incite anxiety for some, providing opportunities for group work that doesn't require a major project can help students develop relationships with others in their cohort. For example, online group peer annotation or an online article reading club can encourage non-threatening peer interaction. An instructor's quick responses to student emails and a willingness to meet virtually to discuss problems or coursework can build relationships that make students feel heard and therefore valued. That's a lot of information. Right now, I'd like to take some time to digest these ideas and think about strategies you already use to promote autonomy, competence, and belonging, and to brainstorm some new things to try. Pause the video and make a copy of this document at the URL you see on the screen, or grab a pencil and some scratch paper to record your thoughts. Follow the instructions on the screen. Set your timer. We'll see you back here shortly. Welcome back. I hope that was helpful. Now let's take a look at 2 educational technology tools that can be used to motivate learners in the online setting. This evaluation process is one you can use when making decisions about educational technology in your classroom. We're going to take a look at Perusall and Trello. Both platforms mimic what is available for real face-to-face interactions. However, both applications transform the traditional practices into interactive platforms. As you did with participation, Let's look at both of these platforms and think about how they are situated within current technology practices, and also how well they meet higher levels of integration on the PICRAT technology matrix. So, to what extent is Perusall situated in dominant structures of production and power? Perusall is an interactive, collaborative annotation platform. Instructors can upload articles and other media for students to view and read as they make annotations and take notes. So, how is Perusall situated within common technology practices? Nearly 1.1 billion people now have e-readers. 80% of schools in the United States use digital content, and more than 114 million journal articles can be found online. With so much of what we read now online, an annotation tool that can leverage that online space is crucial. So, to what extent does Perusall drive the tendency to consume rather than produce, making students passive users of the tool rather than interactive or creative users? Perusall is collaborative in that it asks students to annotate and respond to the annotations of others. However, students may or may not choose to respond to the work of others. They may choose not to read deeply and superficially skim the content. Maybe the instructor does not assign specific tasks for them to accomplish. In these ways, students may be passive, just replacing written text with an online version. So, to what extent could you use Perusall to replicate the traditional practices that are not working today, rather than amplify or transform teaching and learning? Perusall's interactive note-taking feature lets students clip the content, write notes, and go back to the original content. Students are able to combine clips from multiple articles or lessons and share their notes with classmates as discussion starters or with the instructions. Any one of these things could be replication of in-class work. However, when taken all together, it assumes a different level of complexity. I would rate this feature of Perusall, when done as a whole, as CA, creative amplification. Students create new knowledge as they recombine multiple ideas in order to create new understandings. This feature, when done all together, hits all three motivational attributes: autonomy through choice, competence through peer feedback, and relatedness through collaboration. Let's check out another feature of Perusall. Perusall allows students to interact synchronously or asynchronously, which promotes student autonomy. Synchronous interaction also promotes a sense of belonging and relatedness. Email notifications alert students when someone gives feedback on a thread. Giving and receiving feedback can increase self-efficacy. Perusall also incorporates social networking features like @mentions, hashtags, and upvoting comments. If students use all of the above tactics, I would consider them to be creative transformational. Students create a network of colleagues and feedback loops across time and space that transform a flat piece of writing into a centerpiece for debate and ideation. Collaboration and creation enhance relatedness and autonomy, and thus motivation is increased. However, if any one of these things is done by itself, without connections between others and without connections between the individual aspects of the platform, then you're less likely to achieve this sense of creative transformation. Let's move on to Trello. Trello is a project management tool that can help keep goals and tasks organized. Boards can be created that list activities and assign jobs to group members, making it possible to visualize a complex process. Using Trello to aid collaboration can increase relatedness and therefore increase motivation. So, to what extent is Trello situated in dominant structures of production and power? In other words, how is Trello situated within common technology practices? Well, we all make thousands of decisions a day for multiple reasons in a variety of settings. Project management is important, and Trello is a great project management tool. There are hundreds of online project management tools available, although most are fee for service. Trello has over 1 million teams using its platform, and it still has a free version that makes it a good choice for use in the online classroom setting. Trello has a lot of bells and whistles that can add layers of complexity to its use. However, even with all the complexity, it has a short learning curve. It's easy for students to become comfortable with making choices about workflow, sharing resources to support learning, and building relationships by collaborating to reach goals. So, to what extent does Trello drive the tendency to consume rather than produce, making students passive users of the tool rather than interactive or creative users? Well, Trello does have the capacity to be just another tool. If students enter tasks on the boards but don't revisit it or use it to communicate with team members or plan next steps, then there will be little motivation to use it and little benefit from it. Students will simply replicate the traditional to-do list in the Trello platform, and if they choose not to use it for collaboration, it's a passive process tool with no real value. So, to what extent could Trello be used to replicate the traditional practices that are not working today, rather than amplify or transform teaching and learning? Well, again, Trello has a plethora of different kinds of things that students can do to mark their places in a calendar, to vote on best iterations of a project. When those things aren't used, then you're just replicating a to-do list. However, there are some features of Trello that can take the platform beyond just replication. Butler is a feature of Trello that lets users set up automations and commands that let the butler do some of the repetitive work, like checking due dates for Trello board owners. I would rate using the butler to up this workflow as IT, interactive transformational. Creating a workflow that transforms busy work into free time to do other tasks can definitely be a motivating factor. And it definitely transforms the tedium of having to keep track of all the deadlines and specifics of projects. Another set of Trello features includes voting options, the ability to assign jobs to members of a team, the possibility for multi-user collaborations, and the ability to move boards and assignments around easily. Trello is a great place to plan. These tasks are not as seamless or easy to do either on paper or on a whiteboard. I would rate this activity as IT, interactive transformational. These tasks would be impossible to do in any other format, and when next steps are clear, students will experience self-efficacy and be more motivated to persist in the tasks. So in this portion of the webinar, we have explored how autonomy, competence, and relatedness can be leveraged to increase motivation in the online setting by intentionally choosing strategies to meet these needs. We have identified 2 educational technology tools that can potentially enhance motivation and have used the PICRAT matrix to analyze their effectiveness. Next up, you'll explore engagement and the first-generation college student.
Hi, I'm Laura Miller. I'm a first-generation student with a background in library instructional development. And during this video, I'm going to take you on an exploration of technology increasing engagement with first-generation college students. What I mean by that is students whose parents do not hold baccalaureate degrees themselves. We're going to focus on leveraging digital communication as a way to increase feelings of belonging with students new to the in-person, online, or hybrid college experience. And throughout this time together, we're going to dedicate time and focus to translating what you're learning into your own practice as we answer the following questions. Why does engagement matter for students from all backgrounds, and especially for first-generation college students? How can you promote engagement with first-generation college students in your classroom? And which EdTech tools facilitate engagement with this student audience? Let's start by answering, why does engagement matter for first-generation college students? The short answer, the PMERG framework that we introduced earlier in this video series suggests that engagement promotes retention and retention promotes degree attainment. Earning a college degree opens a whole new world of opportunity for individuals from any background, a world where Ma et al. Report graduates are more likely to be employed, take home higher pay from their jobs, rely less on public assistance to meet basic needs, contribute more to their communities through higher tax payments, and live healthier lifestyles, which can then lead to increased well-being, reduced overall healthcare costs, and, for college-educated parents, more active participation in their children's activities. Despite these well-documented benefits, over half of college students do not graduate on time, and more than 1 million students drop out of college every year. Oh, and 3/4 of those dropouts, they're all first-generation college students. So our second question is, how can you promote engagement with first-generation college students? First-generation college students are perhaps the most likely audience to better their lives through higher education, yet institutional cultures are not set up to help these students thrive. Research has shown that digital communication can boost success for students from all backgrounds, and when considered in the context of the unique support needs of first-generation college students, there is the potential for digital communication to be especially transformative for this student group. Existing research is comprehensive in its coverage of the unique social support needs of first-generation college students and strongly associates using multiple modes of communication with developing retention-boosting connections and community on campus. Now let's cover which EdTech tools facilitate engagement with first-generation college students. We're going to spend the rest of our time together exploring digital communication and 2 EdTech tools that help facilitate it, Slack and WhatsApp. But first, let's take an engagement break. We'll spend the next 10 minutes situating what you're learning in your own practice, and we'll do that through 3 steps. First, list 3 ways that you communicate with students. Then, briefly describe the EdTech tools that you use to facilitate this communication. Finally, choose a tool type, for example, digital messaging platforms, or specific tools, for example, Slack and WhatsApp, and answer these 3 questions. To what extent is the tool type or tool situated in dominant structures of production and power? Now, considering the component of the PICRAT technology integration model related to students' relationships to technology, answer the question, to what extent does the tool type or tool drive the tendency to consume rather than produce, making students passive users of the tool rather than interactive or creative users, the PIC in PICRAT. Finally, let's consider the component of the PICRAT model that relates to how teachers use technology in relation to their traditional teaching and learning practice. Answer this question. To what extent are you using this tool type or tool to replicate the traditional practices that are not working today, rather than to amplify or transform teaching and learning, the RAT part of the PICRAT model? Now pause the video and set a timer for 10 minutes. Spend this time working through these 3 steps. Welcome back. Now let's work through the same activity together, critically considering digital communication tools Slack and WhatsApp and their roles in increasing first-generation college student engagement and building connections in the classroom. First, let's talk about what these 2 tools are. Slack, pulling from their marketing website, is one platform for your team and your work. It's an easier, more organized way to work and a central space for conversations, files, tools, and people. WhatsApp is a communication platform that empowers users to be yourself, speak freely, and feel close to the most important people in your life, no matter where they are. Now let's answer those 3 questions that we posed during our engagement break about Slack and WhatsApp. The first question was, to what extent is this tool or tool type situated in dominant structures of production and power? Considering that with Slack, the answer might be 90% of global citizens have a smartphone, but Slack relies a little too heavily on the modern social media reminiscent interface being almost innate to all of its users. For WhatsApp, it's popular with international students, but it's not likely that it's the default enterprise messaging provider on your campus. Another question is, what will it take for student usage to have more weight when it comes to making enterprise-wide technology implementation decisions on campus? Now let's look at that second question related to PICRAT, the PIC part of PICRAT. To what extent does this tool or tool type drive the tendency to consume rather than produce? We can consider these two tools together and Honestly, when faced with a flood of messages, it's natural to become discerning when determining which to respond to and which to simply read and file. These are robust tools, or you can say busy tools, and busy platforms. And they're really great examples of tools that can easily become overwhelming and push students into passive engagement mode. Finally, our last question is, to what extent are you using this tool type or tool to replicate the traditional practices that are not working today, rather than to amplify or transform teaching and learning? If we're thinking about Slack and WhatsApp, if we're using these as ways to digitally pass notes or using other digital communication platforms like them to digitally pass notes, it's easy to default into what Richard Culata, former director of the Office of Educational Technology for the U.S. Department of Education, warns against. And that is a complete digital replica of the traditional practices that are not working today. Everything that we have now, just on a screen instead of paper. So finally, let's think about how we can use these tools to amplify or transform rather than replicate teaching and learning. Here's 3 ideas. 1, you could use Slack polls to survey students in real time, allowing them to choose their own adventure instead of following a preset lecture. 2, you could share documents via WhatsApp before classes pre-reads and then skip the lecture altogether during class time. Instead, you could dedicate that synchronous time to hands-on, small group discussions or activities, and then facilitate those via WhatsApp groups as well to help build those communities and those connections. 3, another idea is incorporating multimedia into lessons, sharing links to podcast excerpts or video clips, and then taking time for students to view them on their individual computers during class. For instance, if you're lecturing on a topic like ChatGPT, you could play clips from news coverage on this technology. You could pull from popular culture like Last Week Tonight and play some comedic clips about that topic, anything that helps the students to situate it in the world that they live in. Thank you for participating in this workshop, and we're excited to continue with the next in the series. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Thanks for participating in this workshop. Thanks for coming along as we explored a couple of different focus audiences and ways to integrate technology into driving participation, motivation, engagement in order to ensure retention of those learners in those different settings. So we'll just wrap everything up by discussing a couple of the key components of the next steps here of trends across what we explored in those different workshops and things that we found surprising as we were applying those the PICRAT framework to that work that we just did. So let's start with overlaps. What overlaps did we see in EdTech's possibilities across those 3 focus audiences that we just explored? What do you think?
I think the overlaps are endless, right? That's why there's such confusion between the 3 words, participation, motivation, and engagement, because they are seen, you can find an EdTech tool that reaches all 3 of those. And it does really depend on the focus and the lens of the learner. So as we explored VoiceThread together, VoiceThread might work in a middle school, secondary classroom. It could work in higher ed too. And it really depends on the focus or the purpose that we're giving it. So I think that that overlap is a great question, because that's why we think, oh, it's engaging, where really it might just be participation. And so until we dive deep into it, and that's what we've done in this framework, you don't really explore the possibilities and how it's impacting learners. At least from
I agree with,
my view.
no, I agree with that, because it's all in the mindset of whoever's assigning the task. If you just say, go annotate this article on Perusall, then you're just going to be mimicking what you do in the classroom with pencil and paper. However, if there are requirements for sharing with each other, for a certain number of comments, for commenting on other people's comments, for including examples, for taking notes and then recombining those notes, all of a sudden you have not just highlighting an article, but actually collaborating with others to interpret that article and then using pieces of that article to build new knowledge, which is actually a very creative and transformational process. So again, it's all in how you use the technology. It's not just throwing it out there for people to click buttons, but actually having that purpose behind it is absolutely important.
And I like the thought about creating knowledge. That makes me think of what we explored when we were looking at digital communication tools and first generation college students. So if you are using something like Slack, something like WhatsApp, something like any of those sorts of digital communication platforms to pass notes, like you're just replicating what you would be doing with pen and paper, as you both just covered. But there's this opportunity to create new knowledge and to, as we talked about, set up this kind of choose your own adventure style approach to classroom time if you use these tools in a way that creates opportunities to engage, opportunities to build on the perspectives that other students are sharing. And what I think is interesting is that it also opens up opportunities to engage the teacher as a facilitator, as somebody who has to kind of like turn on and activate in that environment as well, because they don't have the plan that they're going into the lesson ready to cover. They're going to just stick to that plan. If you open up this possibility for the students to feel like they are a part of guiding you wherever you go with this lesson, then you kind of open it up for the teacher to also maybe end somewhere that they weren't necessarily planning on ending with what they set out to do. They are still probably going to achieve the same goal that they had, but the way that they get there might be different, and that might be better for the student and for the teacher and the facilitator of the lesson as well.
I like how you said that it just replaces, right? Like the passing of notes is, we did, we had that paper pencil and now we're doing it digitally. And I think that's something that's surprising when you apply the PICRAT, is because you recognize how simplistic these tools and these educational tools can be when you boil it down, versus looking at it as, ooh, it has the, it's engaging because it's digital. So it really makes you question what's the goal of this in the first place, but also to rely on those skills that are developed in education, because technology is only great when it works. And like even today, our learning platform was down. So you revert back and we're still using those same tools. We've just found a way to make it digital to sometimes increase the motivation because it's digital. Is there anything else
I've always
surprising?
really liked the planning part. That's always been a very creative process for me. What really scares me about the future of education is how prescriptive it's becoming, and it's taking away those choices for teachers in how they present curriculum, how they are allowed to focus on their passions, because they're not really allowed to do that anymore. They're lockstep with, on this day you will teach this thing and this is exactly how you will do it, and that completely takes creativity out of the picture for the teacher and for the student, because there's no room for them to think differently or produce something different than everybody else. So it's a little scary out there right now, because we're not training them to be creative, we're training them to be I don't know, robots and produce the same thing as everybody else and think the same way that everybody else. But that's not going to serve us very well in the future.
And that trend's only going to continue with teacher shortages and, pulling in people that have degrees, which is fabulous, getting other viewpoints and other, expertise. But when you don't have a teaching background and you're just being handed curriculum and told what to do that day, then that idea of creativity isn't being fostered in any way. So it's definitely a concern of where we're traveling down this road.
I'm intrigued by this idea of, so the Selwyn quote, how he explores the tendency to consume rather than produce. I don't know what it is, but I feel like you all have me throughout this, just like the workshop prep, all of these pieces that we're doing, thinking about it from both perspectives, the learner and then the facilitator of the learning, or the teacher. And what it sounds like we're describing is this, so like the student naturally would have a tendency to consume rather than produce, and what we're pushing on the teachers is consuming rather than producing, by making them into like these robots that are just having to teach it in this way, and this is the way that you have to do it, instead of allowing them to produce something that really lands in the classroom. And so that's interesting. And I just keep coming back to that quote about the tendency to consume rather than produce, because I feel like we have that, but like these future generations, like my 4-year-old, he wants to record videos of himself playing in his room and then watch them. So like he wants to consume, but he also wants to produce, which is like, it's so interesting to think about. Are we going against the natural tendencies of generations of younger learners by trying to get them to be in a place where they're having a tendency to consume rather than produce? Or is that really like how do we get to a place where that's what happens in the classroom, is that you consume rather than produce on both ends? I wonder. And how can we stop going there and leave that place and go to a place that is, again, to go back to what Susan said, helping to set up people to solve problems that don't exist yet? I'm intrigued.
Well, I have a couple of things I want to share real quick. Children are much more creative as children than they are as adults. It's kind of drummed out of them, which is a scary thing. And as far as consuming is concerned, I have a statistic from, and I don't remember the source off the top of my head, but districts have as many as 2,000 ed tech apps available in a district, and students have access to some 70 applications, and they spend half of their time on their computers in the classroom. Consume, yes, they consume and consume and consume, but what are they producing? I don't know. It's a little scary to think about that.
Yeah. All right, well, let's wrap with something positive. What Brianna, help us.
Oh my, don't put me on the spot. Something positive. Well, oh man. Well, at least with that access to technology, we can paint the picture that we have additional resources at our fingertips, right? Like that's our goal. We like to believe that because we have these screens in front of us, we have the world right there where we can utilize it. We might not always be doing it, but it's there.
And
Is
we
that
have
positive? That's as positive as I can find right now.
right. Well, we have the chance to help create processes as well,
Yeah.
using things like PICRAT and creating a new mindset for not only teachers and students, but for policymakers, because that's really where we need to go in order to make changes that'll matter.
Yes, Susan.
I love it. That's very positive. All right. Thanks, y'all. And thanks for participating, everybody who's listening in.
All right. Let us know how you like the webinar. There will be a QR code at the end of the screen, so you can go and fill out a survey for us if you'd like to.